I knew the second I saw the smoke curling over the treetops that something was wrong. Not chimney smoke. This was thick, black, angry. And it was coming from my backyard. I dropped my wrench and ran, boots thudding against the gravel. The boat shed my shed was fully engulfed. Flames roared out the roof, licking the sky, and the air stank of burning fiberglass and motor oil. I could hear the faint pops of my fishing gear and old gas cans exploding inside. "Call the fire department," I yelled to my neighbor, Greg, who had his phone already pressed to his ear, eyes wide. That shed wasn't just a place to store my boat. It was my sanctuary. I built it with my own hands. Spent weekends fixing up the old Boston whaler my dad left me. My son, Nathan, and I had just finished repainting it 2 weeks ago. Now it was a bonfire. And standing at the edge of the property, arms crossed like she was supervising a garden party, was Doreen Caldwell, the HOA president from hell. I stormed toward her, fists clenched. What the hell happened? She didn't even flinch. Her frosty blue eyes didn't leave the fire. "You were warned, Samuel," she said, cool as ice. "That motor of yours has been making a racket for weeks." Several residents complained. I stared at her, choking on disbelief and smoke. "So you burned it down?" "I didn't do anything," she said, brushing imaginary lint off her pastel cardigan. "But if something unsafe happens on HOA property, the board has the right to act in the interest of community safety." I blinked. "That's my private property, Doreen. You know damn well it's not HOA land." She raised one eyebrow like I was a toddler whining about a broken toy. "We'll see what the survey says." Sirens howled in the distance. I could already hear the fire trucks barreling down the main road. But it was too late. The shed was a total loss. And so was my patience. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my back porch, staring at the scorched frame of what used to be my escape. My dog, Boomer, lay beside me, tail twitching in his dreams. I sipped cold coffee and played the day over and over in my head. That woman. That smug, self-righteous tyrant. I wasn't going to let this slide. The next morning, I wore my best shirt and walked into the county assessor's office with a copy of my property deed, the original blueprints, and the boundary survey I'd paid for when I bought the place 6 years ago. The shed was well within my lot lines. No question. Then I drove straight to my insurance agent's office. "Boat shed burned down," I told him. "Arson. I want to file a claim." The guy, a wiry man named Vince with a mustache that looked like it had survived the 70s, leaned forward. "You have proof?" "Security cameras caught everything," I said. Because I'd been smart. I'd installed cameras on the back of my house a year ago after someone slashed my boat cover. I never caught who did that, but I had a pretty strong suspicion now. I handed him a flash drive. On it was clear footage of 2 HOA board members, Bernie and Joyce, cutting a lock on my shed around midnight the night before the fire. Then Doreen herself strutted in, flashlight in one hand, clipboard in the other. They dumped something inside, looked like a can of gasoline. 20 minutes later, the shed went up like fireworks on the 4th of July. Vince watched the footage twice. "Holy hell," he muttered. "You're not just filing a claim. You're pressing charges, right?" "Damn right I am," I said. And I did. I brought the footage to the sheriff. He stared at the video, jaw tightening as he watched Doreen and her gang commit felony arson like they were on a home improvement show. "We'll take it from here," he said. But I wasn't done. I printed the security cam stills and taped them to every mailbox in the neighborhood. Front page. "Your HOA president set my shed on fire." Under that, bullet points, caught on camera. Proof submitted to sheriff's department. Insurance claim filed. By sunset, my phone was blowing up. Neighbors stopped pretending they didn't see what Doreen was doing. Turns out, I wasn't her only victim. She fined the Johnsons for putting up a swing set. Tried to evict a widow for repainting her shutters the wrong shade of green. And last week, She threatened to sue a single dad for leaving his trash bins out past 8 a.m. People were pissed. Greg came over with a six-pack and a stack of emails. We've got enough signatures to force a board meeting. Emergency vote. We can get her out. I took the beer and grinned. Let's burn her down the legal way. He raised his bottle. To justice. We clinked. That Friday, the HOA hall was packed. Standing room only. Doreen sat at the head of the table, still wearing that fake smile, like she hadn't been caught on camera committing a felony. I'd like to begin with the meeting agenda, she said. Actually, I said, stepping forward. We're starting with this. I placed a laptop on the table. Hit play. The footage played on the projector.
Gasoline. Fire.
Her smug face in the flashlight beam. The room went dead silent. Then people started shouting. You burned his shed? You maniac. You put my kids at risk. Doreen stood, face red. This is a smear campaign. That footage is doctored. I was. Deputy Harlan walked in just then, badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. Doreen Caldwell, he said. She froze. You're under arrest for arson, trespassing, and destruction of private property.
Gasps.
Whispers. Phones came out. You can't do this, she shrieked as he cuffed her. I'm the president of this community. Not anymore, someone yelled from the back. She was marched out of the hall, red-faced and furious. I turned to the crowd. Anyone else want to burn something down, or can we get back to living like neighbors? Applause. Actual applause. And the best part? Vince called me the next morning. Samuel, he said, your claim's been approved. Full replacement value. Plus damages. I walked out to the wreckage, stepped over the blackened boards, and smiled. Time to build something better. Next time, with flame-retardant walls. The morning after Doreen's arrest, I woke up to the unfamiliar sound of silence. No passive-aggressive notes on my truck windshield. No clipboard-wielding board members pacing the sidewalk. Just birdsong and the faint hum of Greg's lawnmower down the street. I stepped outside with my coffee and watched a few neighbors walk their dogs, their expressions lighter than I'd seen in months. One woman, Trina from 3 houses over, waved as she passed. She used to avoid eye contact altogether, ever since Doreen tried finding her for using colored mulch. You really lit a fire under this place, she called out. I let the pun slide. Glad to see people breathing again. That afternoon, I met with the county prosecutor. He'd called me in after reviewing the footage and statements from other residents who'd come forward with stories. Not just about Doreen, but about the 2 board members who helped torch my shed, Bernie and Joyce. We sat across from each other in a cramped office that smelled faintly of copier toner and stale coffee. He was a sharp-eyed man in his 60s named Wallace, the kind who carried an air of calm authority without needing to raise his voice. You're lucky you had those cameras running, he said, glancing over the manila folder in front of him. Without it, we'd be looking at a very different situation. I figured it'd come in handy eventually, I said. He tapped the folder. Doreen Caldwell and her associates are looking at a felony conspiracy charge on top of arson and trespassing. That's prison time, not probation. And if the insurance company pushes for restitution, this could end up bankrupting them. I leaned back, processing it all. You think they'll plea out? Maybe. But Doreen's got an ego the size of a Freightliner. She might try to fight it in court, especially if her lawyer thinks she can spin it as a neighborhood safety measure. She lit a match on private property. I said. Good luck spinning that. Wallace gave a dry chuckle. Let her try. Meanwhile, you might want to brace for blowback. People like her? They don't go down quiet. He wasn't wrong. That evening, someone slashed the tires on my truck. I found it the next morning, sitting lopsided in the driveway with 4 deflated Goodyears and a nail-studded plank shoved under the rear axle. Boomer sniffed it suspiciously and growled low in his throat. I called the sheriff. Again. Deputy Harlan showed up within 20 minutes, clipboard in hand. Any cameras catch it? He asked. Not this time, I said. I hadn't aimed one at the driveway yet. He crouched to examine the damage, his brow folding into a scowl. Sabotage. They were trying to make it look like you rolled over something, but the placement's too deliberate. Think it's retaliation? Wouldn't be the first time someone in a tight legal corner lashed out. I'll file the report. You should think about expanding your surveillance. I didn't just think about it. I drove straight to the hardware store and picked up 3 more outdoor cameras, motion lights, and a new dash cam for good measure. By sundown, my property looked like Fort Knox. Greg stopped by around 8. Word is, Bernie lawyered up this morning, he said, cracking open a soda. And Joyce packed up and left town. Her niece said she's staying with family out in Arizona. Guilty conscience? I asked. Maybe. Or maybe she knows what's coming. I nodded toward the wreckage of the shed. Insurance is sending a claims adjuster tomorrow. Said they want to assess the damage firsthand before cutting a check. Greg looked impressed. Fast turnaround. Guess they like cases with clear footage and a suspect already in custody. The next morning, a silver sedan with company logos pulled up to my curb. A woman in her 40s stepped out, clipboard in hand, her heels clicking against the pavement. Mr. Delaney, she asked. I'm Karen Linwood with Heritage Mutual. I'll be handling your claim. Right this way, I said, leading her around back. She walked slowly around the charred remains, jotting notes and snapping photos. She asked a few technical questions: what kind of tools were lost, how old the boat was, whether I had receipts for the paint and motor parts. I've got everything stored digitally, I said. Invoices, photos, even a time-lapse of the shed being built. She raised an eyebrow. That makes this process a lot easier. Honestly, you're more organized than most businesses I deal with. I run a marine repair shop, I said. Habit of documenting everything. She gave a small nod of approval. Well, between the footage, the police report, and your documentation, I'd say this'll go through without a hitch. I handed her a flash drive with everything she needed. You might want to keep an eye on the HOA's legal team too. They're going to try and shift liability wherever they can. Later that week, a letter from the HOA attorney arrived in my mailbox. It was a desperate attempt to spin the narrative. They claimed the fire was an unfortunate incident resulting from proactive community enforcement, and that the board acted within its jurisdiction to inspect a potentially hazardous structure. I brought the letter straight to Wallace. He read it once, then again, slower the second time. They're trying to argue implied authority, that their role as enforcers of community standards gave them a legal right to enter your property. They didn't enter. They broke in. He nodded.
Exactly.
They don't have a leg to stand on. But it tells me they're gearing up for a fight. I wasn't worried. The community had changed in the last few weeks. People who once kept their heads down were now speaking up. A group of residents had formed a recall committee. They were gathering statements, filing complaints, and pushing to rewrite the HOA bylaws. The board's power had been built on fear and silence. Now both were gone. One night, I got a knock at the door. It was an older man. I barely recognized Mr. Ellison, who lived on the corner. He used to avoid neighborhood meetings altogether. I heard what happened, he said. And I wanted to say thank you. Doreen fined me $200 last year because my grandson left a basketball hoop up overnight. I paid it because I didn't want trouble. You're not the only one, I said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a worn envelope. Inside was a letter dated from 3 years ago. It was a complaint he'd filed about Bernie trespassing during a property line dispute. Nothing ever came of it. Thought it might help, he said. It did. Wallace added it to the growing case file. Every new document painted a clearer picture. This wasn't an isolated event. It was a pattern of abuse thinly veiled as community management. Eventually, word came down that the state attorney general had taken an interest. A formal investigation into the HOA's financial records was underway. Evidently, someone had tipped off the county about a pattern of missing funds dues that were collected but never entered into the books. Karen Linwood from Heritage Mutual called me the following week. "Your claim's been approved," she said. "We're issuing a full payout, plus an additional sum for personal property loss. You'll receive the check by courier within 48 hours. I thanked her and hung up. Then I looked out at the blackened patch of land where my shed used to be. It was time to rebuild. But not the same way. This time, it wasn't just about a structure. It was about making a point. No more hiding. No more letting people like Doreen bully the neighborhood under the guise of order. I hired a contractor that afternoon. We drew up plans for a new shed, bigger, sturdier, with reinforced walls and a solar-powered security system. But we also added something else, a covered patio space with seating for 12 and a community tool bench open to anyone in the neighborhood who needed it. When I broke ground the following week, half the block showed up to help. And for the first time in years, this place felt like a community again. The first delivery of lumber arrived just after sunrise. A flatbed truck rumbled up the street, drawing curious glances from neighbors drinking their morning coffee on porches. I signed the paperwork, exchanged a nod with the driver, and watched as he unloaded the pressure-treated beams and composite roofing panels I'd special ordered. No shortcuts this time. Everything was top-tier, storm-rated, and tamper-proof. Greg walked over with a clipboard and a pencil tucked behind one ear. "You're going with the reinforced joists after all?" I nodded while unstrapping a tarp. "Figured if someone tries to burn this one down, they'll need a demolition crew and a court order." "I brought the brackets and the anchor bolts," he said. "You still want to dig the foundations 6 inches deeper?"
Yeah.
"I want the footings to last longer than Doreen's legal defense." He chuckled and hoisted a post. "You get the soil sample back? Stable. Loamy underneath. Good drainage." We worked in silence for a while, just the sound of hammers and the occasional buzz of a level spirit bubble. By mid-morning, a few neighbors filtered in. Trina brought donuts. Davis, the ex-contractor from 2 streets over, brought his nail gun and a belt full of tools. Even Mr. Ellison, cane in hand, sat on a folding chair and offered unsolicited guidance like a retired foreman overseeing a municipal project. The camaraderie wasn't just about rebuilding a shed, it was about reclaiming something that had been taken from all of us. Around noon, a black SUV with government plates pulled up. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out, sunglasses hiding his expression. He scanned the yard, then approached with a deliberate walk that didn't waste a single movement. "You Samuel Delaney?" I nodded, wiping sawdust from my hands. "Agent Reeves," he said, flashing a badge. "State Financial Crimes Unit. Mind if I ask a few questions?" Everyone went quiet. "Let's talk inside," I said. We sat at the kitchen table, Boomer curled under the bench, his ears twitching. Reeves pulled a file from his satchel and laid it flat. "We've been reviewing the HOA's financials. Your complaint triggered a chain of disclosures. We've identified over $70,000 in unaccounted funds over the last 4 years. I leaned back. "You get a warrant for the books?" "We didn't need one. Your treasurer turned everything over voluntarily after the arrest." Apparently, he's been trying to raise the alarm for months, but Caldwell kept pushing him out of meetings. That caught my attention. "George? From the yellow house with the flower beds?" Reeves nodded. "He brought us paper ledgers showing falsified maintenance expenses. Landscaping bills that were never paid to actual companies. Instead, checks were issued to shell vendors, LLCs registered in Delaware under anonymous trusts." "Let me guess," I said. "She was paying herself. In part. Also relatives. And we're seeing evidence that she used HOA funds to pay for a private investigator to dig into residents' employment histories, credit reports."
Wait.
She was spying on people. Illegally. In some cases, The data was obtained through pretexting posing as someone else to access financial records. That escalates things to identity fraud under state law. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the half-built frame of my new shed. You going to charge her with that on top of arson? That's the plan. The district attorney is preparing an indictment under the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. If we can prove a pattern of coordinated criminal activity involving multiple board members, it qualifies. So you're saying this HOA, I said, turning back toward him, is being treated like an organized crime ring? It fits the statute. Embezzlement, fraud, intimidation, destruction of property, all part of a sustained pattern. We're even looking into the possibility of wire fraud. Some of the dues were collected through automatic withdrawals. My jaw tightened. What about the people who paid those dues? Can they get restitution? If we get a conviction and asset forfeiture, yes.
But it'll take time.
Civil suits will come next. Reeves stood and offered a card. If you remember anything else, anything out of place, or if someone contacts you trying to threaten or settle, call that number. We're not done yet. After he left, I stepped outside and waved Greg over. They're charging the board under RICO, I said. Greg's brows lifted. That's not small potatoes.
No.
It's not. The following day, I was served a subpoena. I wasn't being sued, I was being called as a witness. The state grand jury wanted to hear firsthand about the fire, the surveillance footage, and the pattern of harassment I'd documented. I pulled out the 3-ring binder I'd kept for months, the same one I used to track every interaction with the HOA. Dates, times, printed emails, even screen captures of Doreen's more unhinged social media posts where she'd ranted about purging the neighborhood of dissent. The courthouse was packed the day I testified. I wasn't allowed to sit in on the other sessions, but I recognized a few familiar faces in the waiting area, neighbors who'd once kept to themselves now stepping forward with folders and flash drives of their own. When it was my turn, I took the oath and sat under the sterile glow of overhead lights, a court stenographer clacking away nearby. The prosecutor asked his questions with precision, establishing the timeline, the property lines, the surveillance footage. Then he handed me a printed email chain. Do you recognize these? I scanned the header.
Yes.
That's from Doreen to the board. She forwarded a complaint from someone anonymous about the constant mechanical noise from my yard. She tells Joyce to handle it quietly. And what does that mean to you, Mr. Delaney? Given what happened to my shed? I looked at the jury. It means they planned it. Afterward, I walked out into the sun and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It felt like a release, like the final weight of months of tension had cracked loose. That weekend, we finished the new structure. It wasn't just a shed anymore. It had a cedar-lined interior, lockable tool cabinets, and a full electrical panel wired into a backup generator. The covered patio had string lights, a grill, and a long table made from salvaged barn wood. We called it the Yard House. Neighbors came over that Saturday night, kids running around with paper lanterns, music playing from a Bluetooth speaker, laughter echoing down the street. Someone brought ribs. Someone else brought a cooler full of lemonade and ginger beer. It wasn't a party.
It was a statement.
Around 9, George showed up. I brought something, he said, pulling a folder from his satchel. It's the original HOA charter. Turns out it was never properly ratified under state law. Doreen filed it with the wrong office. Technically, the HOA isn't even legally enforceable. Greg blinked. You're saying we've been living under a fake government? Basically. The rules only held power because people believed they did. I took the folder and flipped through the paperwork. So what now? We vote. We can dissolve the board or form a new one. One with actual oversight, term limits, and a community vote on every major expense. Trina raised her glass. To self-governance. We toasted. Not to revenge. Not to victory. To freedom. And this time, no one was watching from the shadows with a clipboard. The yard house had been standing for 5 days when the official notice hit every mailbox on the block, a thick white envelope bearing the seal of the state attorney general's office. Not a newsletter, not a community update. This was a formal declaration. Charges had been filed against the former HOA board. All of them.
Not just Doreen.
Inside the envelope was a full list of indictments.
White fraud.
Identity theft. Conspiracy to commit arson. Embezzlement. Even obstruction of justice, tied to emails recovered from a private server Doreen had hidden in her attic. The state had uncovered communication logs proving she'd coordinated not only the fire, but a system of fake violations used to justify fines and seize control over homeowners. The most damning part? A section labeled Unauthorized Surveillance Operations. Pages of notes and records. Spreadsheets with residents' names, work schedules, medical appointments, even one log documenting when a veteran down the street took his service dog for walks. That crossed every line. I stood in my driveway, the letter in hand, listening to the quiet hum of nail guns from a deck being rebuilt 2 houses down. The air smelled like cedar chips and detergent from someone's dryer, but a strange weight hung over the whole street. Not fear. A kind of stunned clarity. Greg walked up, holding his envelope like it had burned his fingers. "They were watching my daughter," he said, voice low. "They wrote down the exact time her school bus dropped her off." "What kind of person does that?" "It's not about rules anymore," I said. This was control for the sake of control. He didn't say anything, just stared at the paper a second longer before walking away. Later that afternoon, Agent Reeves returned to the neighborhood. Not in a suit this time. Jeans, polo shirt, clipboard under one arm. His badge still hung on his belt, but he looked less like a hammer and more like someone trying to fix what others had broken. He stopped by the yard house while I was patching in the last light fixture over the grill station. "Thought you should see this," he said, handing me a small flash drive. "Court released some of the forensic audit data. You might be interested in who was funding the shell companies Doreen used." I wiped my hands and took the drive. "Let me guess. Not just the HOA board."
Bingo.
Turns out, she had a silent partner. A real estate investment group out of Tallahassee. They've been trying to buy up properties in distressed neighborhoods. She was helping them push people out through fines, harassment, you name it, so they could make cash offers on foreclosures. I stared at the flash drive, then back at him. That's racketeering. On a whole different level. "And you helped uncover it," Reeves said. "That camera footage? The community response? It forced everything into the open. Local news is picking this up. Might go statewide. So, what happens to the neighborhood now? That's up to you. But legally, once the HOA is dissolved and the nonprofit is formally disbanded, none of those rules hold anymore. You all own your properties outright. No more board. No more secret decisions." I nodded slowly, the weight of it sinking in. After he left, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop and opened the files. Corporate records. Bank statements. Memos between Doreen and a property rep named Elwood Price, a name I didn't recognize, but the emails made it clear he'd promised her a consulting position once enough homes were flipped. She was selling the neighborhood out for a job in a development firm. That night, we held a final meeting in the yard house. Not a vote. Not an emergency hearing. Just a gathering. Every chair was filled. People stood along the fence line, arms crossed, listening as George read the last of the original HOA bylaws aloud for the sake of formality. "By unanimous decision, and in accordance with state oversight, we hereby dissolve the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association, effective immediately," he said. The relief in the air was visible.
Shoulder intensed.
Conversations picked up like wind after a storm breaks. I stepped forward. "Some of you asked what's next," I said. "Whether we form another board, or just leave things be. But maybe the better question is, what kind of neighborhood do we want to live in?" A few people murmured. A couple nodded. "I'm not against order, I continued. But I am against silence. We let one person whisper threats and pretend they were law. I say we do everything in the open now. No more closed-door decisions. If someone wants to plant a garden or paint their shutters blue, they should be able to. If someone's dog barks too much, we talk to them. Like adults. Like neighbors. Trina raised her hand. Can we still do a community yard sale next month? Yes, I said. But it'll be a potluck, not a mandate. Laughter rippled through the group, warm, free, the kind that couldn't have existed under the old regime. After the meeting, I walked to the edge of my yard, where the foundation of the old shed had been scrubbed clean.
No scorch marks.
Just fresh gravel and pressure-treated beams supporting something new. Doreen's sentencing came 3 weeks later. I didn't attend the hearing, didn't need to. Wallace sent me an update. 22 years. No parole for the first 15. The judge had called her actions a calculated, exploitative campaign of psychological and financial manipulation. Bernie took a plea deal. Joyce was extradited from Arizona and folded the moment she was arraigned. Between the three of them, restitution to residents was set to begin once asset seizure was complete. State auditors were already liquidating a lakefront property Doreen had bought under her cousin's name. As for the developer from Tallahassee, he vanished. Reeves said the state was preparing a civil case, but catching those types was like chasing fog with a rake. Still, the exposure worked. No more offers. No more whispered buyouts. The vultures circled elsewhere now. A month passed. The yard house became more than a symbol. It hosted movie nights, tool swaps, and once a local food truck parked out front to feed the whole block. The kids painted a mural on one side, a giant compass pointing in all directions, with home written in the center. One morning, I found a clean envelope tucked in my mailbox.
No stamp.
Just my name written in neat cursive. Inside was a check. Karen Linwood from Heritage Mutual had filed a supplemental claim on my behalf after the state confirmed the HOA's actions had directly endangered my property. It wasn't just for the shed, it was for the boat, the tools, the time I'd lost. More than I expected. Enough to replace the outboard motor, refinish the hull, and take Nathan on the fishing trip we'd been planning for 2 years. Greg came over that afternoon, saw the check on the counter, and shook his head. You ever think about how close we came to losing all of this? He asked. Every day, I said. But we didn't. He looked around the yard house, then down the street, where a group of neighbors were setting up folding tables for a weekend cookout. No one ever thought she'd fall, he said. She acted untouchable. Turns out, I said, no one's untouchable. Not when people stop being afraid. He grinned. You gonna name the boat after all this? I thought about it. The old Boston whaler had been nameless since I inherited it. Yeah, I said. I think I will. That weekend, I stenciled it on the stern in crisp navy letters. Phoenix. Because it wasn't just about what had burned. It was about what rose after.